Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to Sona Comstar Q2 FY22 earnings conference call. Please note that all your participant lines are in the listening only mode as of now. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Please note that this call is being recorded. Some of the statements by the management team in today's conference call may be forward-looking in nature, and we request you to refer to the disclaimer in the earnings presentation for further details. The management will also not be taking any specific customer-related questions or confirm or deny any customer names or relationships due to confidentiality reasons. Please refrain from naming any customer in your questions. Now I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Kapil Singh, Head of Consumer and Digital Commerce Research India and Lead Autos Analyst at Nomura. Hi Kapil, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining this call. Good afternoon. To take us through Q2 FY22 results and to answer your questions, we have with us Mr. Vivek Vikram Singh, MD and Group CEO, Mr. Kiran Manohar Deshmukh, Group CTO, Mr. Vikram Verma, CEO of the Driveline Business, Mr. Sat Mohan Gupta, CEO of the Motor Business, and Mr. Rohit Nanda, Group CFO. I will now hand over the call to Mr. Vivek Vikram Singh for his opening remarks and the presentation. Over to you, Vivek.
Thank you, Kapil, and good day, everyone. On behalf of Sona Comstar, I'd like to welcome all of you to the earnings call of what has been in financial metrics our best quarter yet. We'll begin, as usual, with our vision, which we have tweaked a little bit after some excellent feedback from one of our new public shareholders. And because we're a company with a global customer base, global presence, and global competition, we have modified our vision from India's most respected and valuable auto technology company to one of the world's most respected and valuable auto technology companies. Our story is a testament to that long-term vision. We started small, but with an unbeatable technology advantage of precision forming, which has allowed us to grow at nearly 50% CAGR in the first 12 years. In the next phase, our growth moderated to a CAGR of 10%, but we improved our EBITDA margins to 25%, while adding differential assemblies as a new product. Our third phase was truly transformational. We massively expanded our export business, our customer base, as well as our product portfolio. We also started our EV journey here in 2016 with gears for electric cars, and later vertically integrated upwards into making the full final drive assembly. We also did a fairly value accretive acquisition of Comstar, and this, along with our fantastic organic growth, helped us achieve over 32% CAGR growth in the last 5-year phase. All this while simultaneously increasing our EBITDA margin to nearly 28%. While our fourth phase begins now, I would like to highlight that in our 22-year journey, we have grown at an incredible rate of 36%, while always sustaining excellent EBITDA margins. And at any phase in our story, we have exceeded the industry growth rate by many, many times.
Revenue beta part hoga Excel mein. Isme wo add kar
dena. May I request you to go on mute? Sorry for that, gentlemen and ladies. Yes, our values, our results rest on the foundation of our values of integrity, vitality, agility, and frugality. And by staying true to our value system, we hope to continue delivering strong results on all three: growth, margins, and returns like we have so far. We feel that we managed to build quite a unique business by having these three things: large EV revenue share, good scale and high growth, while achieving and maintaining remarkable financial performance. I'll touch upon each of these three aspects in the context of our first half and latest quarter in the next 3 slides. First, we begin with EV. Our BEV revenue share has increased to 21% in H1 from 13.8% in FY21. Our EV revenue in absolute terms has grown by 223% to over 220 crore in the first half. It also gives me great pleasure to report that in the last quarter, we've added 3 new EV programs, 2 from existing customers and 1 from a new customer. With this, we have reached now 20 EV programs. 7 of these are in serial production as compared to 5 last quarter, while 13 are in the order book. These 3 new programs cover 3 different products. A differential assembly program for a compact electric passenger car maker in Asia, who's also a new customer. And strategically, this is a very important win, and I'll elaborate upon this and the importance of this in a later slide. We've also won a differential gears program for an existing North American customer, where the ultimate customer is a large North American passenger vehicle maker. And lastly, the third one, which is a PMSM motor program for an existing electric two-wheeler customer in India. Now we come to the net order book. At the end of Q2, this stands at 13.6 thousand crore or nearly $1.8 billion. For people who are joining for the first time, this is the aggregate value of the next 10 years revenue from all programs that are yet to commence or are still ramping up, minus the impact of all programs that will reach end of life, hence the net value. I want to clarify that when we say order book, we do not include running programs that are already in production. So this is over and above our current revenue run rate. Now the order book is obviously dynamic, and in Q2, since we consumed orders worth 16 billion and 1 new orders worth 12 billion, on a net basis, there is a reduction of 4 billion. Although what everyone has to understand that this is now on a much higher base rate of running revenue versus last quarter. If you see our growth, a lot of this growth has come because we have consumed this order book, because industry growth rate is actually been negative. So this is our growth. Now, of course, we want new order intake, and it always is much higher than orders consumed each year. But this is, as you would understand, hard to predict or manage on a quarterly basis, because order wins are discrete and unevenly distributed events. So we've had quarters where we've added 40 billion to the order book, and also where we've added nothing at all to the order book. A full year, in our opinion, is a much better time frame to measure and monitor new order intake. However, because this is just our second quarter, we thought we will be completely transparent and share it live as we go along. Another highlight on this is the EV part of the order book. Battery EV or plug-in hybrid, as a percentage that has increased from 57% at the end of Q1 to 58.5% at the end of Q2. And because our existing BEV revenue share has also increased in this quarter to 22%, the proportion of revenue from BEV should continue increasing over the next few years. Third, I come to our financials. So first, the quarter, like I said at the onset, this was our best quarter yet. We grew our revenue, EBITDA and PAT by 52%, 24% and 22% respectively. That we've achieved this despite strong headwinds on semiconductor shortage globally, material price increases, freight cost increases, and frankly, each and every input cost is facing inflation these days. This really highlights the resilience of our business. I'm afraid, though, that these headwinds will persist through Q3 and Q4, and the auto market, as well as margins, will continue to remain under pressure from these factors. but as promised to you whenever we've talked before, between 26 to 29% is how we've kept and always talked about our EBITDA, depending on input price variance. To note, our VAV revenue grew by 143%, and it has reached 22%, underlining the pace of electrification in an otherwise very slow or almost negative growth automotive industry. For me, the H1 numbers are more important because they reflect an ongoing business, and I'm proud to report that we've managed to more than double both our revenue as well as net profit over H1 of last year. We had a healthy 27% EBITDA margin for the first half and over 15% PAT margin, while our returns continue to be best in class. Even more important than financial growth, we have managed to improve our global market share in both differential gears from 6% to 6.4%, and in starter motors from 4.6% to 5% in the first 9 months of calendar year 2021, which is a phenomenal rate of expansion from a global perspective. Now, our victories are only meaningful if they are achieved on our priorities and not on an ever-expanding need for more without focus or reason or purpose. So now on to our 4 medium-term priorities: electrification, global market significance, diversification, and lastly, technology, which is how innovative companies like ours survive and thrive over time. In our last call, I'd spoken about how in the driveline business, we were focused on the performance and high performance segment of electric passenger car market, basically 100 kilowatt upward. With our latest order win that I spoke about of a compact car differential assembly business, what it has done is now we can address the entire passenger car space, including the small and mid-segment BEVs from 50 kilowatt upwards. What this does is allows us to supply our gears, differential assemblies, and final drive assemblies to a much wider market. Earlier, it was only US, Europe, and China which were relevant end markets. Now we have a relevant product offering to cater to the emerging small car EV market in Asia and India as well. Now, coming to the motor business, the motor business's core strength has always been making lower voltage motors with high power density and performance. We've extended this strength to making traction motors and motor control units for electric 2 and 3 wheelers. And we've already been fairly successful in the Indian market, where we are supplying to 2 of India's top 5 electric 2-wheeler makers. The longer term aim here for motors will be to keep moving upwards along the power axis and get into traction motors for hybrid and battery electric passenger cars as well. Now, this focus on EV has yielded good results, and while our revenue share has grown 16 times in the last 2.5 years to reach 21%, in absolute revenue terms, the growth is even more impressive at 25 times. Looking at the fact that 58.5% of the order book is EV, this segment will continue to be the fastest growing. Now on to market share, and we continue to increase our market share globally in both product groups and continue to also hold a dominant position in the Indian differential gear market. And if you were to look at it, the biggest reason for our growth this quarter is indeed our market share growth. Because if you look at the industry, there is degrowth in virtually every segment. In fact, the global auto industry had its 3rd worst quarter of sales in the last 3 or 4 years. And our 2 biggest markets, Europe and North America, had their 2nd worst quarters of sales, preceded only by that COVID impacted quarter, which was worse. So if you look at our performance against this backdrop and context, hopefully it will appear even more remarkable, and this is what is translating into financial growth as well. Now, coming to diversification, we begin with revenue cut by powertrain. Two things to point out: the two secular themes, increasing BEV share and the reciprocal trend of our exposure to ICE also reducing in every period, growing from 35% in FY19 to 19% at the end of H1 this year. Moving to geography, I think we are getting into a much more balanced revenue mix with US, Europe, Asia, and India almost all becoming nearly equal contributors to revenue. And this mix will definitely change from quarter to quarter, depending on the performance of these four economies, their end markets, and much more critically, our customers' performance in these end markets. On product diversification, we are happy to report that our journey from components to subsystems and systems is proceeding well. Our revenue share from differential assemblies has grown from 5.6% in FY20 to 24% now in H1. And the second notable point here is the revenue share of ICE starter motors, which is declining every period. Finally, the last one, the one mix that is unchanged, our vehicle segment diversification. The one notable thing here is that the India CV demand is starting to gradually pick up, and we can expect that in the medium term, it could be an additional lever of growth. With that, I will turn the call over to our Group CTO, Mr. Deshmukh, to discuss our approach to technology. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vivek. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Seba and the Rethinks team found across diverse fields that once a tipping point is reached, it takes a new technology 15 years to go from nothing to being dominant. During the same period, the old technology is decimated, catching the incumbents by surprise. This rule has repeated for over 200 years for products as diverse as fabric dyes, car tires, nails, cameras, to cars versus horse cars. It is our firm belief at Sona Comstar that the tipping point of electrification was last year, and in 15 years or by 2035, ICE engines would be reduced to negligible global market share. This rule happens due to a causal feedback loop led by three actors: the governments or the regulators, the financial markets, and the consumers. Government support subsidizes the cost of the adoption of new technology and lowers investment risk. Capital markets reward new technologies with higher valuation multiples and lower cost of capital, thereby attracting more incumbents to switch to the latest technology. The consumers start getting more variety, better prices, and better performance, creating more and more demand. The exact reverse of this starts happening for the old technology players. We have already started seeing this in motion with electric vehicles, and investors, as usual, are ahead of the curve, helping accelerate this trend. During the last quarter's earning call, Sona Comstar's technology roadmap, which is fully aligned with this trend, was presented. Such roadmaps are for the long term, and they don't change in few months, unless, of course, there is a significant disruption in society. Our strong belief in the electrification of mobility dates back to 2016, when we focused on the emergence of EVs, acquired Comstar, and developed products to meet the needs of electric vehicles. Today, we supply a variety of products for electric passenger cars, electric three-wheelers, and electric two-wheelers. And we will continue this journey and make more products to support the electrification of the drivetrain. Traditional methods of business excellence are so far focused on optimizing cost and on cost efficiency. Today's businesses need to be steadfast in the volatile, uncertain, and complex world, while also being efficient. Recognizing this, we embarked on our Industry 4.0 journey with a vision to use technology to achieve a delicate balance between efficiency and the resilience. We implemented various initiatives to digitalize our factories to make our operations smart. While our strategic intent drove these initiatives, the scaling up was possible only if we had able, competent, and skilled employees. To develop digital fluency and build advanced skills in our managers, engineers, and executives, we partnered with NASSCOM to roll out the Future Skills Program. Conceptualized and constructed by NASSCOM and supported by NITI, the program aims to upskill our employees to face digital revolution across multiple functional areas. In the future, we'll work with NASSCOM to develop content suitable for the shop floor employees to bring digital literacy among the frontline associates. I will now hand it over to Rohit to cover the financials.
Thanks, Mr. Deshmukh. Very good day to you all. It's my pleasure to share our second quarter and H1 results with you, wherein we are reporting the best ever revenue, EBITDA, and PAT numbers for the company. We'll start with the slide on the first half results. Vivek has already given you a snapshot of revenue, EBITDA, and PAT numbers for H1, so I'll focus largely on the key factors affecting these numbers. Our revenue growth for this period was diversified across all geographies, product categories, and powertrains, though the highest growth was seen in our focus areas of BEV and powertrain and systems, that is differential assemblies, in the product categories. EBITDA margin at 27% had a positive impact from operating leverage and product mix at 2.5% and 3.8% respectively. Despite price pass-through, RM cost increase has reduced margin by 3.7% due to arithmetic effect. It's important to understand how this arithmetic effect works, therefore we have made an illustration to explain it. I'll request Prateek to display the illustration, please. In this illustration, we have assumed a base selling price of 100 rupees for a product with a material cost of 45 rupees. In case of an illustrative 15% increase in the RM cost, both the selling price and material cost go up by the same amount. As you can see, there is no impact on absolute margin, but the margin as a percentage drops by 3.5%. An adverse impact of 3.7% in a similar way has come on our EBITDA margin due to this arithmetic effect. Besides this, RM cost increase, not having a pass-through arrangement, had an additional impact of 2.1%. Last year, first half EBITDA margin also had 2.1% higher forex gain, because of which the last year first half EBITDA margin looks to be a bit on the higher side. PAT margin at 15.7% was higher compared to the last year H1 because depreciation and interest as a percentage of revenue have gone down by nearly 4%. H1 of current year also had a one-time effect from exceptional income on account of reversal of IPO expenses, nearly 1% post-tax impact on the PAT margin. Next one, please. Now let me walk you through the YOY comparison of our second quarter numbers. We'll begin with revenue. Our revenue for the second quarter was 5.86 billion rupees with a YOY growth of 52%. Our BEV revenue grew by 143% to 1.24 billion rupees, constituting 22% of our total sales. Our revenue grew in all geographies but for North America, which was lower by 14%, mainly because of higher impact of chip shortage on some of our North American customers. On the EBITDA front, it grew by 24% to 1.54 billion rupees, wherein EBITDA margin was 26.4%. There was a positive impact of 1.2% due to operating leverage. Similar to the last slide, the arithmetic impact of the RM cost pass-through was 3.7%. RM cost increase without corresponding pass-through plus the product mix impact had an adverse impact of 1.7%. Besides this, EBITDA margin in the comparable quarter last year was higher by 2% due to forex gain. Moving on to the PAT for the quarter, it grew by 22% to 882 million rupees with a PAT margin of 15.1%. Lower finance costs during the quarter helped in an improved margin transmission between EBITDA and PAT. Next one, please. Now let me take you through quarter-on-quarter comparison for second quarter of FY22. Our overall revenue grew by 17% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, while BEV revenue grew by 28%. We saw revenue growth across all geographies on a sequential basis. Our global market share in differential gears and starter motors continued to grow and stood at 6.4 and 5% respectively based on the 9 months of the calendar year, indicating that we continue to grow faster than the market. Our EBITDA for the quarter grew by 11% on a sequential basis. Compared to the previous quarter, the EBITDA margin was lower due to product mix and increase in the RM prices. We expect inflationary pressure on the input cost of RM and services to persist, at least in the near term. On the profit after tax front, our Q1 PAT included exceptional gain on account of reversal of IPO expenses with an approximate post-tax impact of 100 million rupees. Compared to the adjusted PAT for the first quarter, we had a growth of 22% in profit after tax. Depreciation and finance as a percentage of revenue was lower and has helped in improved transmission of profit margin between EBITDA and PAT. The financial performance of the company needs to be appraised in the context of continuing inflationary pressures on input costs, supply chain challenges, and fading effects of monetary and fiscal support globally. Next one, please. Now, on to the cash flows for the half year. Major sources of cash inflows for the first half have been the EBITDA of 2.93 billion rupees and the proceeds from the primary issue to the tune of 2.94 billion rupees. In terms of deployment or outflow of the cash flow, we used 2.6 billion rupees for the loan repayment. Capex spending was 1.47 billion rupees, and there was an increase in the working capital to the tune of 559 million rupees. Besides this, there were tax payments of 462 million rupees. On the whole, there is a net accrual of 395 million in the cash position, plus the treasury investments of 513 million which were made during this period. While we are on the cash flows, it's fair for me to provide an update on our estimated capex outflows in the current year. Against our earlier estimated number of 6.5 billion rupees this year, the revised estimates are now around 4.5 billion rupees. This change is mainly on account of logistical constraints faced by our capex vendors, pushing out nearly 1.8 billion of cash outflow to the next financial year. A large part of it was skewed towards the last quarter of the current year in any case. Further, there is a reduction of about 150 million rupees in capex due to efficiency improvements. It's important for me to add that this shift in cash flows is not expected to have any negative bearing on our overall expansion plans. Moving on to the key ratios. I will start with the ratio of value addition to the employee cost, which has improved to 5.7 times compared to 5.2 times last year. As I explained last time also, it's calculated by dividing material margin with the total employee cost and is used by us internally as one of the key operating metrics. A higher number implies operating leverage working more favorably relative to the comparable period. Our return on capital employed was nearly constant at 34.7% as compared to last full year. Improvement in the annualized EBIT has had a corresponding increase in the capital employed, and therefore the ROC is nearly constant. Return on equity stood at a healthy 31.4%, though it was lower than 36.4% reported for the last financial year. And that is mainly because of expansion of the equity base following our primary issue of 300 crores, which we had used to largely pay off the long-term debt of the company. Coming on to net debt to EBITDA ratio, net debt of the company is now negative after we've paid down our long-term debt, and therefore net debt to EBITDA ratio has also turned negative. In terms of the turnover ratios, the working capital turnover and fixed asset turnover ratios have improved to 3.9 and 4 times respectively due to higher growth in revenue compared to the growth in both net working capital and net fixed block. With this, we come to the end of the quarterly earnings presentation, and I will now hand the proceedings back to Vivek.
Thank you, Rohit. I think we can head straight to Q&A. I don't think there's much more I have to add. So, Kapil and Sharuma.
Okay, thank you very much. To all participants online, currently we are in the Q&A segment. If you have a question, you may use the raise hand icon located at the bottom right of the WebEx page. We will unmute your line and prompt you to speak, or you may also choose to type your question in the Q&A box and we will address it accordingly. Thank you. We have Mr. Arora on the line with a question. Your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, team. This is Nitin here from Axis Mutual Fund. Thanks for taking my question. Now, the first question is again, on the point which we discussed last quarter also, and you said that, our endeavor is to outperform the market and, the kind of demand which is coming from the electric. Despite chip shortage, we will try to, do better. And, you have grown even quarter-on-quarter basis, you have grown significantly, despite the issues. Now, here, the question is that, when we look at the kind of transition which is happening in the market, you stated in your opening remarks, the electrification, every region. Can you throw some light more just to understand the supply chain once more, on the chip shortage side? How, is it still we are very confident to outperform and do better, and supplies would not be impacted, the kind of demand which is coming from the electrification side? If you can talk about that first, and then I have two more questions.
Perfect. So first, hello Nitin, how are you? Good to hear from you. Yeah, look, the supply chain continues to remain a problem. The chip shortage is real. This is why I said, and if you guys look at the numbers of the overall world industry, just step back and look at it. It is the third worst quarter in the last 5 years, and that's the data I looked at, maybe even longer. It isn't, Europe and US are really badly hit. Will it continue? Yes, I think it will continue. Why I was confident even last time about our growth was because we were growing more from new orders. So let's say existing run rate was you had 100 rupees of business. That 100 I knew was going to 90, but I had 30 of new business coming. That's why I was confident of going to 120. I don't think it's improving anytime soon. When there are many more people more suited than me and more knowledgeable than me who can comment on when finally the chip shortage will end, but not anytime soon, is our estimate and our assumption while we are working. Will electrification continue? I think electrification is continuing because of all of this. while the chip shortage persists and you have higher times to wait anyway, a lot of people can switch their demand and wait for the electric vehicle. So I think electrification is inevitable, immutable, irreversible. So that's going to continue. How we fare is connected, being a B2B2C player, it is connected to how our customers perform and how they manage to overcome the chip shortage issues. So while in the short term there could be fluctuations even with us, in the medium term, we will always be much, much ahead of industry. If you look at the industry growth rate in US passenger vehicle, Europe passenger vehicle, these are our important markets, right? All of them have seen a double-digit degrowth while we have grown by double digits.
Yeah.
So that I can promise you that we will always be far better than industry growths. But if overall industry again has the same issues, we are not unaffected. We are part of it, and we will remain affected because even if we can make our parts and supply them, no car can be sold 99.9% complete. So my parts will just sit in inventory if any one person in the supply chain is affected.
This answers my question. Thank you. Just dwelling more onto it because you had some client addition, and as stated in the call in starting, I am not trying to get into any client names or client specific thing. I know you don't take those questions. The question is more from the penetration point. You know, when 6 months back, when China was 13% of EV, suddenly becomes in 6 months 22% of the EVs. The question here is that do you see in Visage, because of this, even Europe is going very significantly when we look at the numbers. Is it more of an aberration or because in the last 6 months, there is no new model launches which has come in the electric part. It's more of the existing models which is going and taking the electrification numbers higher. So when in next 2-3 years, the way luxury car makers are trying to launch the model of the EV in next 2 to 3 years time frame, just from a longer term, I'm asking this question to you 2 to 3 years, again, not taking any client specific name. Could we see some more client additions here from a luxury side for you?
Yes, is the short answer. We've already got, I think now a fair number of customers. If you, Pratik, can just takes back to that BEV slide, which has number of programs and customers. Perfect. So, Nitin, this is already 11 customers. In 3 years, we will have many more customers just because of the pipeline we have and many more new entrants. There are a lot of people who still don't have a significant EV model or a significant born electric platform. I mean, some of the car makers have retrofitted, I would say, for the lack of a better word, existing models with a battery electric vehicle powertrain. When they design some vehicles from scratch, they will come in and we will add more. And also to be noted now, right now my revenue, and if you saw 5 programs were fully ramped up last quarter, now it's already 7. When these 13 come in, the revenue will also become far more diversified across many customers, and it includes some of the major current automakers also, just that their programs haven't started yet. And I hope that in 2022-23, a lot of big programs will start.
This is helpful. I'll come back, Vivek, in the queue, and thank you so much for answering it.
No, thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Satyam. Your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, team, and thanks for taking my question. First question to Vivek is that, as you have talked about that, your first set of BEV customers on the differential side were performance EV customers, and now you are trying to go down the curve and get more into mass market EVs as well, and you have had one order win from Asia. But just trying to understand the dynamics, how that differs there, because with the performance BEV cars, we know what you did really well, the differentiation in terms of your ability to deliver high torque applications, right? So does the appreciation for that differentiation really go down as we go down the curve into mass market? And what will that manifest into? Will that manifest into lower margins?
Hi, Satyam. Good to hear from you, and very good question. And I know that the last phrase you used is the crux of your question, but I will still answer the technical part of it also. Yes, just because a customer of ours makes a smaller sized vehicle or a lesser priced vehicle, it doesn't mean that they don't want to give their customer, our consumers, the car drivers, a better, more kicky driving experience, a more torquey car. So they are focused, and this Asian customer wants to make a really high torque zippy application. It just doesn't have to be EV for the sake of it. It should be a battery electric vehicle which is also fun to drive, high performance, while being smaller, right? What is important for us is to deliver, like we keep saying, more torque per gram. Now, keeping the constraints of a smaller car and a smaller package in mind, can we deliver a differential assembly which delivers that higher torque while not costing a bomb and doing it at the margins that we are used to? So to answer the last part, no, this would be equivalent margin to all our battery electric differential assembly projects that we are doing. Same. And that is the trick, right? To try, you can always get market share by lowering price without sacrificing price by designing the product to be more efficient, the materials to be more efficient, the gear design to be more efficient, that you're using less, hence it costs less. So you are price by sacrificing your profit, but you are reducing price by reducing cost of manufacturing, which is why this is very key for us. And it is an important win because it opens the door to many automakers who don't have the, the luxury EV offering only. Most of the car market is actually geared towards the hatchback, compact or small sedan space. So it allows us far greater access. Now we can access, I would say, the middle of the pyramid as well.
Thanks, Vivek. Thanks for that. And if I can just also get an update on what's happening on our effort to win BSG customer. I mean, so far we have still not won an order, if I'm correct. So what's delaying this? Is there some challenge in, COVID-driven challenges, or are there some other issues here as well? And if you could also share some update on, how many customers we are in discussion with and what stage.
Sure. So I'll request Sat to take it. But overall, no new win. If there was, I would have reported it. Sat, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. We are working with a few customers, both in Europe and in Asia. And generally, it's a very technology-driven component or the assembly. It has its own lead time for testing and validation. So we are engaged with right now around 4 customers, and the discussions are going pretty well. So at the right and appropriate time, as Vivek said, we will inform you on further development.
Okay, thank you for that. And lastly, one question for Rohit, if I may. Rohit, so on margin front, our margins slipped a bit, and while top line performance was very good, margins slipped a bit. And especially if I back out what the implied Comstar margins would have been, console minus standalone kind of. So that seems like Comstar margins might have slipped to as low as 20%. So is that ballpark correct estimate? And secondly, how do we improve from here? Because on Comstar side, we don't have a pass-through arrangement or an opportunity to take a price hike or something. And so how does the margins start improving, especially given traction motors potentially could be a bit margin dilutive, is the sense one has.
So ballpark, I think the number sounds okay. The number that you spoke about. Now, see, in terms of margin, we've already explained. So in case of even the motor business, also there are both kinds of cases. So we do have material pass through for copper In case of many customers, we do have a price pass-through for aluminum. So steel is the only commodity where we don't have any pass-through. So there are two types of impact which have come on the margins on the motor business side, like I explained for the overall console numbers. One is the arithmetic impact, wherein in spite of the price pass-through, there is a drag on the margins because of the arithmetic effect. And the second is the genuine impact on the margins because of increase in the RM prices. So that's why we did mention that because of the strong RM prices, the margins, were sort of under pressure in the last quarter.
Yeah, and to add to what Rohit said, Satyam, the real thing there or the real loss is actually only about 2%. The rest of it is actually just math, what Rohit showed you. That because the base changes and the extra money that you get as reimbursement for material price increase, this goes sits in your denominator. So the percentage changes, but it's not real on how much did you make in absolute terms remains the same. So 2% is the actual drop. It's not as high as one would imagine. Material prices will cool at some stage when I can't predict, and it will come back as it does. We have seen in the last 6 years many of these cycles. That's why I keep saying that it fluctuates. Second, the second part of it, when you're looking YOY, last year we had unusual, actually highly unusual forex gains, which were in our favor, and it artificially inflated those margins at that point. I think also because we do mark-to-market accounting of forex, so every quarter we actually look at the value of all our forex hedges, and that's why there is more fluctuation quarterly basis. But the real drop actually is 2%.
Okay, thank you. We have Shyam next up in the queue. Hi, Shyam, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, hi Vivek. Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity. So my first question is, if you look at our geography mix, clearly China has done exceedingly well quarterly. So, I mean, without taking any name there, what's exactly happening in our, from our supplies to China, and how do we think of this going forward? That is the first question.
Hi, Shyam. So good to hear from you. One, we've actually added China and all of Asia, rest of Asia, to one thing called Asia, just for a comparison, because we were doing a very strange thing, saying North America and Europe, which were two continents, and then suddenly saying China, which is a country. So we put that. But you're right, a lot of the growth has come from that segment, because if you look at it relatively, China has degrown the least amongst all three major car markets. There is no other real reason. So if everyone was 100 and everyone dropped by, let's say 20%, North America dropped by, Europe dropped by 15%, and China only dropped by 2%, relative proportion in the mix goes up. That's all that happened. There is no new win or no new major program that ramped up in this quarter. It's a relative shifting of revenue.
Okay. I think there is some shift from in terms of classification. I think I misread.
Yeah, what we did, ROW was a bigger chunk, which was also actually almost all Asia. Because if you look at these continents, Asia, Europe, and North America, and we take India out of Asia, of course, there is not much left in the automotive world. It's just UK and South America, which is 1% of our revenue. But Asia, biggest part of Asia is China and will continue to be China.
Sure. Thanks for that, Vivek. So I think my other question on the margin, I think, was answered in the prior question. The last one, if you were to think about 17% sequential sales growth, what would have been approximately volume vis-a-vis realization increase? We saw realization, was it like 3.7 to 4% that we have also spoken about in the margin section. So just trying to get a split between volume and realization pass-through that we got in the top line.
Sorry, I didn't understand now.
Okay. Revenue growth at the console level, on a quarter-on-quarter.
Sorry, Shyam. Pratik, can you go to this slide so that we can also look at it while... Yeah, Pratik, can you go to that slide? This one, Shyam?
Yeah, revenue growth, if you see on a sequential basis, was up almost 17% at the console level. Just trying to understand how would have been the split between volume and realization increases that we would have got because of the commodity pass-through. That's all.
Good question. I can't answer it just yet. It would require some clever thinking. Because volume, I have to think about gears volume, assemblies volume. There's so many products that will be hard to do. But you're right, there is a bit of what we call empty sales. Empty sales are basically nothing that you got because steel prices increase or copper prices increase. You just got the pass-through, right? And that is empty. I would say that would be a percentage, which is why actual EBITDA margins in that sense has not gone down that much. It just looks optically because there is some empty sales there. How much? I can't answer, but I will get back to you on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, think about it, Shyam. I will answer that. What Rohit said, 3.7%. So 3.7% is that increase, which is the math part of it.
Yeah, Vivek, but that is not on a sequential basis because second quarter we didn't have a price increase. There was only some pass-through. So actually between first and second quarter, there is no empty sales. I mean, the terminology used, so to say. And in terms of volume, I think it's a bit tough because there are 3 products or 4 products we are looking at. And clearly here you can see BEV revenues have grown faster than the rest of the revenue. So that's a different unit of sale as compared to say the
Correct, and actually part realization won't make sense because even within one type of product, there will be hundreds of SKUs with different pricing. Actually, there are products in gears, for example, there is a gear which is 45 rupees and there is a gear which is 4,500 rupees. So very hard to figure that bit out.
Okay, thank you. Next in line, we have Nitij. Nitij, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for taking my question. One thing I want to understand is what are you doing on the starter motor side differently that's helping you gain market share? I think the differential gear is a bit better understood, but on starter motors seems you have gained through the last 2 years. So what's really driving that?
Hey, Nitij. Good to see you again. Sat, do you want to take this and speak a little bit about the differentiating factors or USPs of our starter motor?
See, Nitij, I mean, for starter motor, it's the power to weight ratio and also the durability cycle, which we are offering to our customers. And most of the growth happened in a segment where both are very critical for the vehicle. In addition to that, we are also giving a very good advantage to OEMs on the temperatures handling, and our starter motor can handle up to between minus 40 degrees to 120, 140 degrees. So these are the advantages we are offering as our standard package to the OEMs. And though other tier ones would ask for the premium on as far as the pricing is concerned, but we are offering these as our USP. The other factor which contributes for us is to the response to the concerns or response to the customers on their application. So we don't just give our standard starter motors, we work with OEMs and we give them application-specific solutions. So these are some of the advantages we are offering, and that's helping us to win businesses.
Okay, thanks very much. And just quickly, can you share what are your utilization levels in both gears and motors?
So gears at the end of first half around 75%, assemblies, well, very close to 100%. In differential assemblies, the demand supply keeping us on our toes. I think in the motor business, for the starter motor segment, it will be between 55 to 60%. There we had installed a fairly high amount of capacity 2-3 years ago, so we have that available.
Okay, thank you very much. Next in line, we have Jinesh. Jinesh, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Vivek, continuing on the question of capacity, the starter motor capacity which we had put 2-3 years ago, can that be, is it fungible between starter motors and traction motors? How does it work?
Sat, do you want to take that?
Sure. These are the two different products, and it's some of the equipments you can use it, but primarily these are the assembly lines, so these are more specific to starter motors and the EV motors. But within starter motor, you can produce a different type of starter motors. It can range from 1 kilowatt to 3 kilowatt or so. So in that sense, it's fungible, but between two product line, it's very difficult.
Yeah, and to add to that, Jinesh, the motor business, both traction motors as well as starter motors, is not that capex intensive compared to the gear business. For around 600 rupees of investment, you get about 3,000 rupee revenue on starter motors. So 1:5, 1 rupee, capex, 5 rupee revenue. So it's because it's an assembly business, right? So it's a lesser capex.
Right. And with respect to the traction motors, particularly on the two-wheeler side, how well are we geared up for any substantial ramp up in the Indian market?
No, great question. Actually, it's taking us by surprise, the speed at which the ramp up is happening. I think that is one of our key operating things that we look out for. So, Sat, how much is our BLDC capacity right now?
Today we are at 150,000 units a year, and we are in the process of setting up and increasing the capacity to 400,000 units, both BLDC and PMSM.
So, Jinesh, we are quite ahead because each vehicle only requires one. And last year it was only 25,000, and we were at that time 100,000 capacity. So we were quite ahead in terms of capacity and what the industry was. But looking at the fast rate of growth, we are staying ahead of, the demand curve.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up in line, we have Priya. Priya, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you. Hi, Priya. We are unable to hear you. Would you be able to speak up, please? Okay, maybe we move next in line while Priya sorts out her headset issue. We have Kishaba. Kishaba, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for providing me an opportunity to ask question. Hello, sir. So I have a couple of questions. One is, when will the government announce PLI schemes will start adding to the bottom lines? That's one question. And the second question is, I recently saw a tweet from you on the new factory setup being brought up. So how long will it take for that, and what would be the main components that you would be producing in that?
Thank you, Keshav. Thank you for following me on Twitter. I didn't even know anybody saw those things. But yeah, it's a factory we are building in Chakan. It will be a plant where we'll make differential gears and differential assemblies. We also have an existing small plant in Pune that we will be shifting to this large plant. It is our largest plant yet at 10 acres. Should start getting operational. Vikram, you want to take that one on when and what the plans are? Vikram?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know where to unmute. So the new plant, we are targeting by end of March or April, we should be in production. But this will be, first phase will be to shift our existing, as Vivek explained, our existing Pune plant is actually a very small plant which is overflowing. And then we are shuffling some businesses and redistributing our volumes from Gurgaon, which we are sending all the way to south and west. So we'll be redistributing and creating more space in Gurgaon because as the volumes are ramping up, we need more space to set up in Gurgaon. And while we will expand in Pune to cater most of the south and the west. Of course, we have a differential assembly business and we will grow the differential assembly business for the Indian domestic for the west and south. That's the overall plan.
Thanks, Vikram. And on PLI, Keshav, we have applied. We don't know whether our application will get accepted and we get enrolled. And when the money comes, I think the scheme clearly says that FY 22-23 will be the first year of when they will evaluate, and the payment or the cash flow, the payout from the scheme is, I think, in FY 23-24. So yeah, we don't know any more than what is already out there in the public domain and what has been announced by the government. We will apply, and what will happen to our application and the certainty of getting any incentive is unknown at this moment.
Okay, thank you. We have next in line, Naresh. Naresh, your line is now unmuted. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. First question is regarding BLDC. You said about this capacity being increased from 30,000 to 4 lakh units. So I just wanted to understand the timelines regarding that and whether we already have order visibility or we are currently in discussion and we'll be having those orders along when we get ready with this capacity.
Sure. So one, Naresh, we already have 150,000 capacity, not 30.
Okay.
And we already, like I mentioned, we are already supplying on 3 motor programs to 2 customers in 2-wheelers and 1 in 3-wheeler. And yeah, we are in discussion with Sat can take this more on how many, but quite a few number of potential customers, but that's not anything to think about because only when you have confirmed purchase orders does it become real for us. But Sat, you want to throw some more light on how BLDC is shaping up?
No, both the product BLDC and PMSM motors are shaping up pretty well. And we are in discussion with more than 15 customers having pretty good volumes forecast. As far as the capacity is concerned, I think we'll be ready by first quarter of FY 23 with the 400,000 capacity. So we are targeting May, June of next year where we'll be having the capacities. And we are assuming that, in that period, we will have pretty good customer base and the products.
Understood. Second question again on margins. You have many things clarified already, but again, sequentially, if I see the gross margins and one of the comment you highlighted, there was no price increase quarter to quarter we have taken. So I assume then everything is volume quarter to quarter, the sales growth. The gross margin dip there means the raw material inflation has not been passed on. So is it right understanding? And how much, after that, if I want to understand the raw material index, how much it has gone up after that also, so that cumulative, how much is still to be passed on?
Yeah. So if we look at sequential slide, Pratik, can you please go there? Q1Q comparison. So basically, there is a slight fall in the margin on a sequential basis, and like we've said, it's actually a mixed impact of product mix, and also there was some delayed price increase pass through to our vendors, which has impacted us in this quarter. So although there is no increase in the RM prices as such, but there is a slight impact which has come in this quarter because we could manage to delay the price increase pass through to our vendors to this quarter. And to answer your other question, actually, I think April was the last when the steel prices actually were increased.
Apart from that, everyone should remember there is also freight, which has gone up by many times, not percentage. It has gone up by many times, freight rate.
4 or 5 times.
Yeah, and being an exporter, you have to absorb those things. Operating leverage, and because we are growing, we are able to absorb those and keep the margins where they are. Otherwise, it is a very inflationary environment.
Hi, Vivek, can I take a couple of questions from the queue as well?
First, sir. Why not?
So, one question has come that was there any RoDTEP benefit for H1 in the reported numbers?
No.
Okay.
So, Kapil, this is what Rohit meant by, in his very broad statesman-like line of, removal of fiscal and whatever benefits that the regulators. Actually, till last year, and this is one of the things I wanted to highlight, that last 2 years, a lot of things have been gone. MEIS is gone. RoDTEP was supposed to come and help bridge that gap for exporters. It has not. We used to be in the GSP regime with US when we exported to the US. That benefit is gone. We are not on that list anymore. So there were a lot of incentives available to exporters in general, which are all gone. Which is why I keep maintaining that the fact that we are still between 26 to 29 is quite remarkable after all of these things gone away.
Got it. One more is from Priya Jay. Can you shed some light on collaboration with Nexus IRP on magnetless motors? What is the expense incurred due to same and projected ROI?
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Deshmukh to answer that, but projected ROI is not something we have calculated or will calculate, to be honest. If innovation is subject to the whims of ROI alone, there will be no innovation in the world. Something that doesn't exist, how do you calculate the market of that? If we all became people who judged every innovative step by just measures of how much money it will return, there will be no innovation. I mean, there is a very good book called Innovator's Dilemma that I'll guide everyone to. And the classic mistake that big companies make when they look at new products or new innovation like a magnetless motor is this. What is the size of the potential market? Market is not big enough, let's not do it. What is the IRR? What is the ROI? We have not. If we had been that kind of company, to be honest, we would have never made the drive assembly for EVs. At that time, when we made it in 2016, There was no market. So that I can assure you, we will not be that company. So we have not and will not calculate it. What is the expense and status, Mr. Deshmukh? You can brief everyone on.
So the difficult part of the question, Vivek has answered. The electric motors that we make and everybody makes has got magnets. And especially for the high efficiency motors, which go into drive applications, these magnets are made from rare earth metals. And this material comes from China, or 75% of, or 90% of this comes from China. So two problems. One is that it has to be imported from China, and because of geopolitical reasons, the prices fluctuate. So you can't be sure about when the prices will go up. Over last 10 years, these prices have gone up and down by as much as 3 times. Second problem is, in a typical motor, the cost of these magnets, especially magnets, high performance magnets of this rare earth type, costs anywhere from 20% to 45%, depending upon the type of motor and configuration, etc. So it's a big chunk of the cost. What we are trying to do with IRP, with the Israeli partner, is co-develop electric drive motor for initially for 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler application, which will not have magnets. So once we develop a motor of that type, and good progress has happened so far, but right now it is in very early stages of development. We hope to complete this in next 18 months. When that happens, when we realize that, we will get a big cost reduction. We will be free of uncertainties of the magnet cost, and therefore we should be able to get more market from our customers. Ultimately, the benefit of this will go to our customers and to the end consumer. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you, sir. I mean, yeah, it is worth doing because it makes, like Mr. Deshmukh said, it makes the product lighter, more certain, less polluting, because neodymium mining is a very polluting activity, and eventually makes the electric vehicle cheaper for the end consumer. Hence, it pushes the boundaries of electrification and creates more market, which is why it is worth doing, and we will do it. First, we will make the product. If we do succeed, then we will look at how much market, how much the capex would be behind it, etc.
Hi, Jaiwa, can you take the next question, please?
Okay, next on line we have Mahesh. Mahesh, your line is now unmuted. Thank you.
Hi, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. On capital expenditure front, you said this year we reduced from 6.5 billion to 4.5 billion. So will this capex go to next year?
Yes, most of it. I think Rohit mentioned that about 15 crore was, we have found more efficient way. So 15 crore is reduced permanently, but rest of it will just shift by 1 quarter each.
So what will be this number for next year, sir?
Sorry?
What could be the number next year on capital expenditure?
So 180 crores is what is shifting from this year to next year. And I think original plan for the next year was around ballpark 150 crores. So that's where we are as of now. But obviously with new order wins and all, this can change.
Thank you, team. Due to time constraints, this was the last question that we could take. I would like to thank the management of Sona Comstar for taking out time. I know we ran a bit longer than what was budgeted, and thanks to all the participants as well. I'll hand over to Vivek in case there are any closing comments.
No, nothing. Thanks everyone for attending, giving us your valuable time, attending our earnings call and showing interest in us and our story. We are committed to building a long-term business while ensuring continual alignment and transparent dialogue with our shareholders. Should you have any further questions or need any clarification from us, please feel free to reach out to us or to CDR India. Thank you once again and see you next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. You may now disconnect from the call. If you have any follow-up questions, you may email it to us, and then we will pass it to the management accordingly. Thank you.